us tonight another candidate who's running for the same seat, District 10. Same seat that Jody Heights is holding, and that is Dr. Richard Wingfield. And Mr. Wingfield, or Dr. Wingfield, please come and tell us what's on your mind tonight. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the dinner.
You're welcome.
I'm a boy from Queens, New York. I came to Georgia 35 years ago. After 5 years looking unsuccessfully for full-time work as a philosophy professor, but I found a job at the University of Georgia, where I'm still teaching 35 years later. I had met my wife in New York City a couple of years before I came here. My wife, Sujata, who I proposed to when she returned to India, and she eventually agreed to marry me and ended up coming down to Athens. So we raised 3 children who went through the public schools. And now I'm at the point of leaving the ivory tower behind and entering the political fray. And to explain that, I want to talk about another boy from Queens, Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, as you know, won the support of the vast majority of your fellow citizens in Putnam County, in the 10th district, and throughout Georgia and throughout the South. Now I know his supporters are not in the room, but he managed to win over the vast majority of our fellow citizens. And he didn't pander to people talking about his Christian credentials. He didn't pander to people talking about coming from small towns or having roots in Georgia. He didn't pander to people by talking about his personal struggles growing up or the struggles of his immigrant parents. He cut to the chase. And he told people, I'm going to get jobs for you. I'm going to bring back work to America. And he could succeed in winning the allegiance of the vast majority of people here in Putnam County, in the 10th district, and in Georgia, for 2 reasons. First, people have reason to fear for their jobs and livelihood. Because despite all the victories of the civil rights movement, we have still become the most unequal nation in the developed world. 1%, the richest 1% have as much wealth as the bottom 90%. We have less social mobility than any other developed nation. And our full-time employment is under attack, both from advancing automation, which has already devastated manufacturing. It's now coming for the rest of us, the 85% of us who work in the service industry. And then there's the advance of contract, freelance employment, where manufacturers or companies are able to stop having full-time employees and find people to work at any time, at any place, anywhere in the world. That's one part of it. The real reason to fear for one's livelihood. And by the way, having equal pay for equal work is not going to help you if you don't have a job. Amen. Having a living minimum wage is not going to help you if you don't have a job. But there's another reason why Trump could win. And that is because we Democrats, as much as we may be proud for our past achievements, we have not delivered the true solutions to the problems of joblessness and the declining share in our natural wealth of wages. Now, that was not always the case. FDR, in 1944, at the end of his career, when he was already a sick man, delivered his final address to Congress and said, our Constitution is not sufficient to deal with the economic developments of our time. We need a new Bill of Rights that will guarantee that people have jobs, that they have affordable houses, that they have health care, that they have access to education, that they have access to culture. We have to go about doing the things that were used as emergency measures during the Depression and make them standing features of a just and fair society. Now, we all know his agenda of a new Bill of Rights was not executed. And 20 years later, when Martin Luther King was at the height of the victories of the civil rights movement. He knew that the struggle was not over. We had to undertake a new struggle of freedom that was directed not at equal political and civil rights, but an equal economic opportunity. And so we went down to join the striking sanitation workers in Memphis, where he was shot down. At the end of his career, he was calling for guaranteed jobs. That didn't happen. But 7 years later, Coretta Scott King set up an organization, the National Council for Full Employment, to fight for jobs for anyone who wants one, to be provided by our government. She tried to get legislation passed, but it didn't happen. Well, here we are. Here we are, 40 years later, and I've chosen to run because I want to fight for, and invite you to join me in fighting for a new social bill of rights. And the basic plank, the core plank of that fight will be for guaranteed jobs, where our government will prove that it is really for the people by stepping in and providing employment at a fair wage for anyone who wants a job. No matter how many times you hear from economists that our unemployment level is going down, that in some respect an economy can never eliminate unemployment, there are millions of Americans who want to work but can't get a job. They're not lazy. There's nothing wrong with them. The market does not supply employment. We need to raise once again the call for guaranteed jobs, for a federal job guarantee. And it can be done. It was done on a mass scale during the Depression with the Works Progress Administration, but we need to do it again as something that will be a permanent fixture of a fair and just society. And we can have people put to work with all different sets of skills. We can train them on the job, and we can address all the goods and services that we need, but they're not being provided. And I think you know around here all sorts of goods and services that are wanting. All sorts of infrastructure that needs to be rebuilt. A green infrastructure, broadband for everyone. Fixing dilapidated housing, providing affordable housing, providing health care, providing transportation for people who are trapped because they can't drive, or they don't have a car, they can't see friends, especially in the countryside, they can't go to doctors, and so forth and so on. It's a life-changing measure, and you can see it if you think of what happens to our young people. There is no way to stop and eliminate the school to prison pathway if we do not guarantee jobs for any young person who wants one. Think of how different it will be if young people know that they have a job awaiting them at a fair wage when they get out of school. If we want to really eliminate the situation where people are ending up in jail because they could not find a legal way of getting a decent living, and we want to stop people from having to return to jail, because when they leave jail, they can't find any kind of employment. We can end this by offering guaranteed jobs to anyone who leaves prison, to anyone who comes back from military service, and to the rest of us. Because if we have guaranteed jobs, we lift the fear that all of us live under. The fear of worrying about whistleblowing, sexual harassment, racial discrimination, environmental damage by our employers because we're afraid to bring it up because we'll lose our jobs. But if we have guaranteed jobs to fall back on, we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about trying to organize a union where we work and being fired, because we will have a backup. And of course, this will make a huge difference if we want to think about the freedom of women, to really be able to exercise real freedom regarding their reproductive rights. Because how can you really be free with regard to your rights to decide what you're going to do with your life if you're not in a position to be able to afford the children you want to have? We have to guarantee jobs to anyone who wants them. And needless to say, in creating the tightest of labor markets, where we increase the greatest amount of consumer demand because everyone is working, we are going to give a boost to the economy at large. And we're going to create the conditions where wages elsewhere in the economy can be raised. And raised in a way where, for the first time since 1973, wage levels no longer stagnate. We need to ensure that everyone who works has a wage that rises as the wealth of the economy as a whole rises. That was the case from 1945 to 1973. And it allowed large parts of the American population to have a rising standard of living. But that stopped in 1973. And no Democratic administration has done anything to stop that stagnation. But we have to do something about it. We have to ensure that we have, on the one hand, a new fair minimum wage. That is not just the living wage, not just tied to inflation increases, but tied to the increases in productivity, increases in the wealth of the nation. And if you do the math, you go back to the minimum wage of 1968, it was $1.60. You adjust it for inflation, it comes to $10.50. You adjust it for how the economy has grown, how our productivity has increased. What do you think it comes to? Anyone, what do you think it comes to? It comes to $22 an hour. Well, let's be a little modest. Let's think of $20 an hour as a new minimum fair wage. And then let's think about evening the playing field between employer and employee. Because even though we know you can earn a living as an entrepreneur, you can earn a living as a landlord, but if you fail in either, you are back where 90% of the breadwinners of America are. That is, we are relying on our capacity to work, to earn a living, to get a job. Well, let's even the playing field between employer and employee by requiring that 50% of the seats on the board of directors of corporations go to employees elected by their peers. Let's require mandatory unionization in all firms. I am part of an effort to unionize all employees at the University of Georgia. And the union movement has been having a very tough time. It's down to its lowest numbers of proportions of our labor force in our entire lifetimes. We need to make it a law that all employers have to engage in mandatory collective bargaining. This is the beginning of a new birth of freedom. And if we add to it the adjustments that will allow work and family to go together, where we require employers to give us paid family leave so we can take care of our spouses, our children, our elders, and if we provide free public daycare, free public elder care, child allowances of $500 per child per month, then for the first time, we'll be able to speak of a situation where no one will be disadvantaged by having to take care of their family. And I'm talking in particular of women. 50 years ago, the Equal Pay Act was passed. And yet, as Chalice has pointed out, white women make 80% of what white men make. Black women make 65% of what white men make. Hispanic women make 55%. Equal pay for equal work is not going to solve the problem. We have to ensure that everyone can afford to take care of their family and to pursue their career and to get involved in politics, no matter what their role in the family. Then we can begin to eliminate the divide in wealth and power between men and women, and also begin to eliminate the divide between black and white. We need to not talk about the middle class, but talk about eliminating the underclass. We need to wipe out poverty. We need to raise the floor to $20 an hour. That's $41,600 a year. And if you investigate how much wealth there is in this country, how much income there is, I can make a very good case that it's easy to do that. It's a question of political will. So I invite you to join me in what I consider to be a new movement, a new chapter in our struggle for freedom. I hope to transform political debate not only in the 10th district, but throughout America and the world. And I hope you will join me in the struggle for a social rights agenda anchored in guaranteed jobs. Thank you.